Hello everyone, welcome to the office. This is the home office. Don't worry about this, sound okay, good stuff. Oh crikey, I'm looking at my own mug. So this is a new thing, so we'll see how this goes. Is the sound quality alright? Give me a thumbs up if it's alright, good stuff. How are we doing? 23 people following. What I'm going to try and do is keep an eye on any queries coming in from Periscope. Let's have a look. So, point of today, oh crikey, that's changing a lot. Point of today, or this evening, is to go through and answer any queries you have on what the point of HS2 is. Is it happening? Why? Is it overpriced? Is it too cheap? You know, should we be building more extra lines along it? Why is it 2 tracks, not 4 tracks? All these things. As many queries as you can think of. Is it dreadful for the environment? Is the 120-year carbon return period nonsense, or is it proof the line shouldn't go ahead? Chuck me your questions and I'll do my very best to answer them. And I've got two screens either side of me. I've got 2 screens here either side of me, so I'm going to try and provide reasonably well-informed answers. We'll see. I've got my cup of tea. There, cup of tea, and I've got 2 Tunix caramel wafers, so I should have enough blood sugar to keep me going. Send your questions. And if you don't send questions, I'll just end up wittering on, which will be rubbish. So the more questions you send me, the better. Let's have a look here if I go. So while you send these, oh, crikey, let's just mute that. That's my own voice, which is no good to anyone. Live, good. Yeah, so if I've got that up there, hopefully comments will appear and I can answer them. Right, here we go. First question from Tech Priest. If you exclude the cost of the rolling stock and the stations, does HS2 seem competitively priced? Good question. So, if you exclude, just looking at phase 1, because phase 2 is still a bit woolly in terms of the overall price, it's not got as much detail, but just looking at phase 1, if I whiz over here, I can tell you exactly what the different prices are. So, in fact, wait just a sec. This is live after all. In your latest copy of Rail Magazine, which you should have all got hold of, you will see a reference to some costs for a couple of different projects. I've just watched myself run off. There's a bit of a delay on this computer, so that's fine. So you're maybe seeing things 15 seconds behind reality. Meta. So for a comparison, I picked out and pulled out basically the costs. In fact, I can even get the spread. So this is like interactive. So I'm going to be pulling up spreadsheets left, right, and centre as well. So if I go to, let's have a look, just my writing. Oh, I'm going to turn that right down. If I go to my own folder here, basically, if you pull out the costs, HS2, the costs of stations and of the rolling stock, you end up with a cost per mile-ish of around about, what is it, 170 million pounds. That's in 2019 prices. And don't get me wrong, that's a lot of money. But if you compare that, for example, to HSL Zuid in the Netherlands, that cost around about 109 million pounds per mile. And if you look at one of the kind of main high-speed lines in South Korea, the cost for that was 200 million pounds per mile, and both of those projects generally excluded stations. So actually, if you consider kind of comparable projects, actually HS2 is not crazily overpriced. Yeah, so that was I need to be quicker at answering questions. Got 4 already. Hi Gareth, this is a good one. This is from Lady Macbeth. Hi Gareth, do you understand why people on the left are hesitant about HS2? Yes, there are lots of reasons for this. One of them is about spending money unduly, which we shouldn't be. As the left, I'm a socialist myself. I would suggest that that we have to think beyond spending taxpayers' money, as is often and said. The reality is that HS2 is not spending a pot of money that has a label on it that we can take off and put another project's name on it. Actually, the way that investing in infrastructure works is that you can do as much of it as you can, limited only by the risk of causing massive inflation and also by the resources to actually deliver it, such as time and engineers, of which we're short of both, which is why HS2 is actually a very good way to spend that kind of to make that investment, because it's one line giving you a massive railway upgrade on 4 railway lines. So in terms of the money side of it, there's not really a left-wing case to say the money should be spent elsewhere. That's buying into George Osborne's neoliberalism. Sorry to everyone here who doesn't buy into that theory of. Anyway, don't worry about that. Other point: environmentalism and the need for climate, the kind of rapid onset of heating climate as a result of man-made activities, humankind's activities. Actually, it's basically men. Let's face it. HS2 is a fundamental part of reducing the UK's greenhouse gas emissions, and that's including the fairly substantial carbon emissions from its construction. The key thing, the key thing that's being omitted by a lot of green groups, particularly the Green Party themselves, who oppose HS2 vehemently, despite actually being pro high-speed rail, I'll point out, which is a totally contradictory position, because high-speed rail, HS2 is what you get after 10 years of developing a high-speed rail network for the UK. Anyway, unfortunately the case has just not been made, and this causes a lot of problems. The case has not been made about what HS2 is for, which is about the existing railway network. You'll see I post this all over the place. Yes, I know there are lots of Green Party people who are pro HS2. Someone just pinged up there, but that case about the existing railway network just hasn't been made, and the reason for that is partly because it's outside of HS2's remit. They're an arm's length government body. Their remit is to build HS2. Their remit is not to define franchise strategies in 20 years' time. That's the DfT's job, and one they do not like doing. In fact, any sign that they're could be perceived as meddling in franchising, despite them basically controlling the whole thing anyway, is not politically palatable, certainly for the current administration that we've had for the last 10 years. So yeah, I hopefully do understand the case, given that I'm on that kind of side of the political spectrum. Can we get close to an estimate of how much ancient woodland would be lost by HS2's construction? You can get beyond an estimate, certainly for phase 1, which is reasonably well designed, kind of well advanced in its design, not quite a detailed design yet, but reasonably well advanced. They've published all the details of the impacts on ancient woodland. You can find it themselves. There's a thread that's really good that HS2 did that goes into those details, talks about the impact. An important thing to understand, yeah, I mean, absolutely, the impact on ancient woodland, and in fact, more importantly, on lots of other types of ancient woodland gets picked on. I don't know why particularly, because it as a specific designation, it's not necessarily that important from a biodiversity perspective. Semi-natural ancient woodland is plantation ancient woodland, which is ancient woodland that existed on a map but has been subsequently replaced, or particularly around the Chilterns. Actually, there's a reasonable amount that doesn't have quite the level of biodiversity value that you see in other ancient woodland areas. But anyway, things like special areas of conservation and triple SIs and general local habitat areas that are protected or undergoing kind of rejuvenation need to be protected as much as possible. But HS2 does that. It does protect them as much as possible. I did a thread and talk about this in my city metric piece, that if you look at the route, it threads and weaves its way through a lot of ancient woodland on all these different sites very successfully. So anyway, in terms of answering your question, you can find those numbers on various HS2 reports. And what proportion of the UK's ancient woodland would that represent? It's something like, it's less than 1/10,000th of the UK's ancient woodland, so it's tiny. That doesn't diminish the importance of minimising it even further, but frankly, it's tiny. I'm not going to draw comparisons between projects as I have done in the past, because I might get told off, but you can go in and have a look at all of the £28 billion worth of road projects that are being proposed at the moment, and the level of environmental destruction is huge on those, huge compared to HS2. Is there a plan to get Old Oak to Euston? Lots saying it's unachievable. It's not. It's just the political cowardice is put that up in the air and suggesting that it's a good idea to kind of play with that. The report, so Oakerby's report, which has been in the process of being vaguely published, it's supposed to come out this week, I think, goes into detail about Euston and the connection between Old Oak Common, which is a terminus, the intermediate station just outside, it's at Old Oak Common. It's the intersection of HS2 and the Great Western Main Line, so that's Crossrail as well, of course. And that station is key for connecting to Heathrow, which helps to minimise the need for, ideally eviscerate the need for any domestic flights whatsoever. So that station is very important. But so too is Euston as a terminus, because without that, you just make the HS2 becomes not nearly as useful, if you get rid of that terminus in the middle of London-ish. But also, fundamentally, Euston, St Pancras and King's Cross, particularly with Crossrail 2, eventually, you're going to become basically one station. Crossrail 2 will actually connect the two up. It'll sit halfway, one entrance at Euston, the other entrance at St Pancras, King's Cross, St Pancras. It'll become one station. That is, you cannot platform trains when you have the design of Euston, the new design of Euston platforms lots of trains in a certain way that's very well optimized. The flying junction just outside of Euston is an absolutely wonderfully elegant combination of operations and permanent way design to optimize trains coming in and out and not getting in each other's way, which is what happens at most kind of conventional major termini. King's Cross, for example, at the moment is having a massive upgrade to try and to reopen extra lines. So it's vital that work goes ahead, but it's been designed. The design process is going ahead. Of course, it's expensive. City approaches are always expensive, but it's necessary. The Euston station upgrade is a project that would have to happen anyway, independent of if HS2 went ahead. So designing it to be kind of plugged into HS2 is a no-brainer. Is there a plan to get all the... Yep, done that. Sorry if I forget to read your names. Do you think... So this is from the Glass essay. Do you think it would look different, better, less expensive if trains were renationalised? To be honest, it would make no difference. Independent of who owns train operating companies, because it's only train operating companies and the rolling stock operating companies that are in private ownership. The reality is they're fully controlled by government anyway. So it just changes the name on the payslip of the staff of those companies. I'm pro a state-owned train operators. I think it's a good thing. I think that the railways are a public service and they should be managed as such. But it'll make no difference to fares. It'll make no difference to how reliable the railway is. The thing that changes fares and reliability is capacity. So HS2 is a fundamental part of that. By increasing capacity in the railway network, not just on the new line, but most importantly on the existing railway network, more trains means that you reduce overcrowding, you manage demand in such a way that fares will reduce. Fares increase when the railway is really busy to manage that overcrowding. You can charge when you've got a train that's full, you can charge what you like. It doesn't matter because someone will be able to afford it. So by increasing the capacity of the rail network, you allow fares to reduce. Without doing so, you'd end up with a hugely overcrowded and unreliable railway. Right, I'm not doing a very good job of going through these because I'm getting so many more questions than I expected. Is this all nice and clear, everyone? You all here? I'm going to have a bit of sip of tea. Right, okay, so next one. I've always wondered, would the Edinburgh-Glasgow Belfast-Dublin corridor be suitable for high-speed rail? That's from Harry C. Main. Why not? There are lots of parts of Europe that have essentially very rural areas with high-speed rail passing through to allow a connection between significant centres, kind of urban centres. It would be an absolutely phenomenal engineering feat. The thing that you'd have to, from my perspective anyway, the thing that I'd want to see would be at that HS2, I believe, it very clearly displays its benefits in terms of massive release capacity in the existing railway network. A connection from, say, Glasgow to Belfast and Dublin, that kind of corridor, would have to justify itself in terms of modal shift. It would have to justify, there'd have to be enough journeys made by road currently that you justify building a new link. I think rail links are always a good thing to enhance and ideally minimise the number of people who drive, freight as well, but you'd have to look at the whole equation. So much as I'd love that to be proposed, we have limited resource in terms of engineers like me and like the engineers who are watching this, hopefully. Hello everyone. Limited resources them, so you have to prioritise things. Money is not a limited resource, frankly, in this situation, because as you invest, actually get every pound you spend, you get a massive return on that. Not just in the infrastructure being brilliant, but also new infrastructure doing its thing and improving the economy and allowing people to move around and mobility and all this stuff. But actually, in training skilled people, in paying people to do a job, they then spend that money in the kind of the area they're working and so on and so forth. I'm in the Green Party and I'm pro HS2. Yes, sorry, that shows where I've gotten questions. I'm miles behind. That's from Jane Ensis. Thanks, Jane Ensis. In the current designs, is there provision for international services to and from Birmingham in the north? No, I'm afraid we have to join Schengen. We have to be part of the Schengen agreement before that works, because there is no space in these new stations, or indeed the current regional stations, to build customs facilities. No space at all. It just isn't that. It'd be hugely expensive to add it. Actually, the important thing is to make sure that the exchange between Euston and St Pancras is as smooth as possible. Crossrail 2 will help that eventually, but that needs to be improved as much as possible, and the connection so people don't walk along Euston Road, because I walked along Euston Road, I got a nosebleed. It's one of the most polluted parts of the UK. Yeah, so more work to be done on that. But a physical connection between High Speed 1 and High Speed 2, much as I'd love that to be a thing, it doesn't make any sense until we rejoin Schengen, or until we join Schengen, which, given the current political whimsy of this ridiculous nation, it doesn't seem very likely. Right, let's have a look. Current design, captive trains, why not double deck? Is HS2 burn gauge? Is HS1? Burn gauge is a bit of a misnomer, really. Burn gauge is a standardised gauge across Europe that hasn't really existed for ages. It's kind of the name for an agreement that said, let's make sure that railways, gauge, by which I mean loading gauge, not track gauge. Track gauge is the distance between the two rails. It's standard across most of Europe. Loading gauge is the area around the train that you can fit, around the track that you can fit the train back and forth through. HS2 actually has its own unique gauge that's based on the various European loading gauges, and it optimizes it slightly. We've done some clever stuff to require a little bit less space, but to fit the same train through. So actually, the modelling we've used to create that, what we call an infrastructure gauge, we've improved that, kind of modified it a little bit. But yeah, if eventually you did build a connection to international trains, then yeah, any ICEs or any of those trains could fit through. In terms of double-decker trains, I think they're a dreadful idea. They're really bad for access. They don't improve capacity very much. But some of the proposals for HS2's captive trains do include double decking, so there's a potential for that. But I'm not a huge fan of double deck trains. I think they're a bit rubbish. There are some options, some places where they're usefully applied, some places where accessibility things have been fixed, but I think the vast majority of HS2 services will end up running on the existing infrastructure eventually, and so having trains that are double deck is a nightmare. Right. Someone thinks that calling it High Speed 2 is a bad call. So many people pick up the Save 20 Minutes line. Yes, I agree with that, but it is High Speed 2. We've got High Speed 1, so we have High Speed 2. I don't think the name is the issue. The issue is the terrible communication about what it's for. And that's only really been fixed recently. HS2 have kind of a few new people, new faces in the comms team that have helped fix that, actually. But they're fighting an uphill struggle. It's like turning an oil tank around. Yeah, interesting analogy to use. Anyway, the communication's been terrible, but call a shovel, it is a high-speed line, and crucially, high speed is what enables HS2 to achieve what it does. If you slowed it down, of course, you don't get the benefit. It becomes just a bypass for the West Coast Main Line. You don't get the benefit on the Midland Main Line up to Sheffield and on the East Coast Main Line up to sort of Peterborough and up to Doncaster, Leeds and Newcastle, and me here in York as well. I just realised that you can see a load of stuff dumped in the corner. Don't worry, this room's a bit of a mess, don't worry. Do you think that one operator should run on both the HS2 and the West Coast Main Line, why not do it apart? Yeah, I think that there should be a single intercity operator across the UK, frankly, once HS2 is fully operational. And it should run all of the interconnecting services. And then I think that my personal preference is that you then regionalise massively. So you'd have West Midlands focused services, you have East Midlands focused services, perhaps combining a little bit, Manchester focused, Leeds focused. But you'd have essentially suburban hubs that would have their own railway network. So you'd split Northern in half, for example. You might have a bit of trans-Pennine operational kind of connectivity. But for me, the optimum situation is that the train operating companies, or whatever they end up being called after franchising dies within the next year or two, is that you have HS2 being the backbone of the intercity network, and then you have, with a single train operator, and then on the existing railway network, you have separate train operators that are running regional railway services. And the extent to which you have the interconnectors joining the dots and stopping everywhere, and who runs what, is to be decided. It's a very complicated rail map. I couldn't do that thinking about it in 5 minutes answering a question, but that's how I see it, because then you get much more regionalisation. That pleases Tom Forth, because then the regions can really define their own what railway they need, which is good. I think that's a good thing. Agreed. Incapacity in there, yep. What advantages are gained by having terminal stations? This is something I learned recently. William Barter is fantastic to read on this. I used to think terminal stations were a terrible idea, but actually somewhere you have to have a terminal station. You need somewhere that you can park your services, so you need a fan area where you park up services that are kind of between going one way, going the other. So actually, if you design the station throat properly, with proper grade separation, you end up with quite a well-optimised system. So Euston, Curzon Street, are both wonderfully well optimized railway stations in terms of how they get services in and out with minimized dwell times and not conflicting with each other. There's a video that I put on Twitter ages ago of the 3D alignment for the railway lines coming out of Euston, and it's just before they reach Old Oak Common, and the way the lines sweep over it, it's just stunning. It's a wonderful bit of optimized operational and infrastructure design. There's no point in building a railway if you don't think about how trains are going to run on it. And okay, segue. So if every now and then you'll hear people refer to High Speed UK's plans. Colin Elliff, who's one of the two people who developed those plans, I have great respect for him, and he interviewed me, and I kind of got into the railway as a result of him giving me the nod. But High Speed UK's plans have been developed by engineers with, as far as I can tell, either zero or very little operational input, and it shows, frankly. William Barter could go on for ages explaining why that is. I'd recommend you go and follow him on Twitter because his explanations, and actually his piece that's in this same issue of Rail, this is issue 897, he's written a really good piece in here that I'd recommend you pick this one up. It's still on shelves. It goes into really good detail about, firstly, that 18 trains per hour on HS2 is not particularly unheard of. It's actually easily achievable. Well, easily means it's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. Right, what else have we got? Advantages, terminal stations. Would building the line without high speed still offer the same capacity benefits to the network? No, it wouldn't. It definitely wouldn't. Can a cost-benefit case currently be made for an extension to Glasgow or Edinburgh? Frankly, I don't care about the cost-benefit case, although you probably could build it. It should happen because you still, north of the new lines, you end up with that conflicting slow and fast trains issue again. So yes, it should be segregated. To what extent, given that the traffic does reduce as you get further north towards Scotland, to what extent that needs to be a totally new line or for tracking with a bit of separate route, for example, over Beat-It, where you perhaps build a more shallow gradient through a tunnel for the potentially you'd use that for freight and then put the high speed stuff over the top. There are different things you could do, but I would it needs to happen. I think it should happen. For example, that's not a crazy suggestion either. The UK Labour Party had it in their manifesto, for example. So I think it should happen. Thumbs up. I can't remember this is the problem. I can't remember what the thumbs up was for, but thanks to this Hippo Tweets for the thumbs up. Would it be cheaper if you didn't do high speed? No. I think the estimate is around about 10% saving, but that's on infrastructure alone. That doesn't account for the fact you'd need more rolling stock, which means you'd need more stabling, more maintenance, all these things. Plus, if you redesigned HS2, you're starting from scratch, so you're right back to you've probably set yourself back by another 5 years. You have to go through the whole legal process again. We don't have time for that, and also the speed is what enables it to achieve the capacity release on the West Coast Main Line and the Middle Main Line and the East Coast Main Line and all the intersecting cross-country routes as well. You slow it down, you need to build more than one. That's really expensive, complicated, requires lots of engineers. Hopefully that's clear. Are these answers clear? Am I rambling? I'm probably rambling. That's what I do. Let's see what we got. So, is there a specific reason it's not connected to HS1? Yeah, for Schengen, unfortunately. Without being part of the Schengen agreement, there's no point because there's no space for customs facilities at the regional stations. All the way from Amsterdam to Glasgow would be awesome, wouldn't it? It would really be wonderful. Avanti, Trenitalia pointed to run West Coast Mainline HS2. Yeah, they are, but that's only for now. That's only while HS2 Phase 1 is operating. After that, things will change. Is there a plan to link up HS1 and HS2? No, I'm afraid there isn't. Schengen again. Can you comment on the validity of HS UK proposal? The literature seems very plausible. This is from Bash Runway 3. I'm afraid they're not very plausible at all. That's because they've been defined by engineers like me without really consulting any operational experts, so they don't work. And they don't resolve the conflicting traffic issue very well, and they'd be much more expensive, they'd take much longer, and they'd be hugely more environmentally damaging. So they're not worth paying any attention to, I'm afraid. And I know that Colin and Quentin will be hugely insulted that I say that, but I'm sorry, it's true, gentlemen. But why not two different ones? Oh, sorry, I'm not sure what that's in reference to. Oh, anyway, we'll come back to that. Phil, sorry, as far as I know, it isn't. Oh, crikey, I'm falling behind now. Need to push passengers onto HS2 is about increasing local capacity. Yeah, so, all clear. HS1, HS2 link. Yeah, sorry, Schengen, stupid Brits. Yes, we are. No offence taken. Local capacity increase into Leeds seems small. What's expected? That's not true, actually. On several of the lines that connect in through Leeds, you get a capacity increase of between double and triple the number of current commute peak time seats. So that's massive. For example, between Doncaster and Leeds at the moment, all the intermediate stations have epoxy, 1 or 2 hours services an hour, and they're like 20 minutes apart, and then they're rubbish. That line is a perfect example of that capacity release I'm talking about. All those trains, in fact, someone shared a brilliant graphic showing the interaction of those services and the huge gap in the timetable you have to allow the fast trains to get through without, the LNER trains to go through without stopping. You just have a huge gap in the timetable. Get rid of those LNER services off onto HS2, and you get much more bunched up services, and all the trains can stop everywhere. Yes, that means a moderate journey time increase, but the point is you then connect into the hubs. So overall, for longer journeys, it doesn't matter. You end up with a saving because of the speed of HS2. And in terms of local journeys, it's more important that you can turn up at a station and you don't care when the train is. The reason why everything transport works so well in London is because you turn up for a train and you don't care you don't have to look at the timetable because it turns up in 2 minutes. When we talk about when people, I don't like this phrase because it's a bit generic. When people talk about levelling up the north, what they really mean is everywhere outside of the M25, you have to turn up and you wait for an hour for a train. In lots of places, and even in the centre of cities, 50-minute frequencies on some of the really intensely used urban lines. It's just rubbish. You should be looking at super high frequencies. Look at what Thameslink can achieve, which is the most high capacity railway in the UK. 40,000 passengers per hour per direction. That's what we should be aiming for in Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, and actually quite a few of the smaller cities as well. Is the authority facing resistance and shortage of funds in acquiring land for HS2? To be honest, I don't know much about the land acquisition of HS2. It is just, there's been all sorts of mess. Don't get me wrong, like HS2 as an organisation has just made a right old mess of quite a few things for the last sort of 10 years. Certainly as they've started land acquisition, there's all sorts of... But it's a big government project. Of course stuff goes wrong because it's big and humans are generally inept and we make mistakes and we need to learn from it. We need to capture that learning. But fundamentally, the problem with a lot of this is because the UK just doesn't bother to invest in infrastructure, and even when we do, it's boom and bust. We haven't got the skills base, not just for engineers, but also for commercial experts, for project managers, for operational experts, for software developers to get the signalling right. Look at Crossrail. The issue with boom and bust is that we don't have this skills base just sat waiting in the railway. We have to hook it in from elsewhere because the railway's got so much, or infrastructure more generally, it's just got such an unstable level of investment. It's hopeless. If Indy Scotland enter the EU, could international Schengen trains travel through GB non-stop? It's not going to happen. I'd love that to happen, but I just can't imagine a reality of that working. It's a very good question, yeah. Just a thought experiment. I mean, you could, in theory you could, but politically it's just not a reality. Josh would like to see my map for the rail regions. Maybe that's one for the future. It could be quite fun. Some full-blown crane easting. Actually, I have been doing that for Network 2050, which is something that's slowed right down because I've been so busy the last year. Search hashtag Network 2050, and you'll see some of my early suggestions of that and what those might end up looking like. Same thanks for being very clear stories, lovely. Do we know just how much extra capacity HS2 would free up on existing lines? We don't know exactly how much, no, because no one's bothered to model it. We do have lots of examples of where that has been, we do have some lines where examples have been shown, but those, in my opinion, are quite conservative because they're kind of just based on what the existing timetable looks like. They don't consider, for example, the fact that we should be procuring new rolling stock. It's ridiculous we have so many short trains running. But as a rule of thumb, a lot of the lines approaching the big termini for HS2, you're looking at a doubling or a tripling of capacity. And you can achieve more if you then think about the further future where we're having to do a huge amount of signalling renewals over the next 10-15 years. By the time HS2 fully opens, you might well have a lot of lines running with ETCS. That isn't a panacea. It doesn't win you capacity at the expense of HS2. But what it does allow you to do is pull trains even closer together. And then you start looking at capacities probably much more than doubling or tripling. You're looking at even higher. But nobody's bothered to model that because... And I don't have the resources to do it. I've got a day job, I'm afraid. Although I've tried to tease it out of a few people. Leeds are quite good at that sort of thing. So prod Leeds ITS. Transport Scotland have preliminary plans to build new HS high-speed infill north of the border. Yes, they do. I've seen some of those, actually, or seen some of the early sort of... Is there any future-proofing in HS2 to allow for further expansion? Actually, not particularly. There is, in the sense there's a free train path, unless they muck it up with trying to reduce it from 18 trains per hour to 14 trains per hour. there is passive provision for one train path. The thing is, HS2, and this sort of reinforces the point that HS2 isn't about capacity on HS2, it's about capacity elsewhere. In having 18 trains per hour, you have a capacity of nearly 20,000 passengers per hour per direction, which is like 50% more than the East Coast Main Line, Midland Main Line, and West Coast Main Line combined. So that's a huge leap in capacity over the current long distance travel. And I agree with the Greens that we need to. This isn't about growth for growth's sake. We shouldn't be increasing the amount of long distance travel. So that, in my opinion, is easily enough to accommodate modal shift for long distance travellers. So long as you back it up by taking the commuters who currently use long distance travellers out and put them onto the existing, keep them on the existing network. I think there's enough capacity in HS2 for the future, given that we need to not be growing and growing and growing. We need to manage modal shift. So moving people away from flights and cars. Other people might have a different view of that. Good God, the messages have expanded and exploded. There are a few trolls have appeared as well. Hello, the lovely trolls. How's HS2 financed? Oh God. Oh, I'll skip that one. Google it. I could try and explain it. I'll do a terrible job. I'll stick to the engineering and the ideas stuff. Sorry, Adam. It's a good question, and maybe one for a thread. But it's borrowed against future gilts, which have a 60-year return period. Anyway, I'm swimming out into deep water at that point. When do you think we'll hear an announcement for HS2? This week. Why is the national media so against HS2? Because they're all right-wing and they hate investing in infrastructure. Because infrastructure is for people, and the right-wing media hate people. That's not all media. Actually, even the Times today published a fairly sensible piece on it. But you will find there's a general. I mean, if you look at the ownership of the vast majority of the print media, you'll see that it does face a certain direction, and that direction does not like investing in infrastructure for people. Thoughts about combined network with Northern Powerhouse Rail? Thanks, David Powell. Love to see you here. Sorry you asked the question about 15 minutes ago or something now, don't you? But I'm getting behind. What is the time? 1834 already. Yes, I think HS2 Phase 2B will be paused and integrated with Northern Powerhouse Rail, which is a good thing so long as they don't forget the East Midlands. Fake accent. Okay, fine, thanks for that. Here they are planning on a national 7.5-minute frequency in the Netherlands between main cities. Yeah, exactly, absolutely. 7.5-minute frequencies are pretty good, actually, and everywhere outside the M25 would benefit greatly from that level of frequency. Would something like that be available in Britain? It should be. You look at the 90-second headways on Thameslink. They're absolutely stunning. Will HS2 use ERTMS? That's the European Rail Traffic Management System, which is coupled with ETCS, which is the European Train Control System. Yes, it will. Even though we've Brexited, it'd be completely daft for us to develop a new system because you'd have to pay to develop it. It's nonsense. We'll use that system. Is provision built into construction plans to mitigate the climate change impacts? There's a very good report by @SafeMyth on Twitter who goes into those details. HS2 are doing their very level best to reduce the carbon emissions from construction. Could HS2 provide enough capacity to completely replace domestic aviation? Apart from the fringes on the islands, yes. How much demo work has started around Euston? Demolition work started around Euston. A fair amount, yeah. I mean, there's some really good aerial shots. They've wiped out a lot of stuff in readiness. I mean, the project needs to... when we talk about shovel ready, actually we're beyond shovel ready. The shovels have already dug into the ground. We're doing ground remediation works already in Curzon Street, in the area around Curzon Street in Birmingham, the new station there, and around Euston. Question, would you support a day of national mourning for the retirement and scrapping... Oh, it's Pacer Commander. Hello, Pacer Commander. Would I support a day of national mourning for the retirement and scrapping of the Pacers? No, what I'd suggest is a bonfire of celebration for scrapping the Pacers. Sorry, you're going to hate me and be really angry. No, the Pacers. Would Highland Chieftain Aberdeen services be transferred to HS2? Yeah, actually, currently it's not proposed. It's proposed that they'd exchange at Edinburgh, Glasgow. I have two minds about that. Actually, I think changing trains isn't something we should be afraid of. People do it all the time in London because the service frequency is good enough. My preference actually would be to start running more frequent services that stop everywhere with fully electrified trains north of the Central Belt. So they stop everywhere and they run frequently. If you electrify and do lots of journey time improvements, you'd not see an increase in journey times, but you'd see a massive increase in the benefit to places like Lawrencekirk and Dunkeld and Burnham. That would essentially. So my preference is that on the existing network, as much as possible, we homogenise, so that's make the services look the same. So it could happen, but my preference actually is that it isn't. It wouldn't be. Assume the Scottish government electrification goals by 2030 have achieved. Am I a feminist? Yes. How would freight travel combine in the stopper services on the current main lines? It's a very good question. Actually, freight, if you flight freight, so what I mean by that is don't pull it over into passing loops. You just keep the freight moving. And generally with modern freight, you're moving away from the coal. There is a reasonably kind of stability and increase in some bulk good movements, but actually the growth market in freight is intermodal, generally intermodal. So that's light stuff, that's stuff for supermarkets as well, all that good stuff. That can travel at higher speeds. So actually a good thing would be to continue to enhance, do research into running reliably faster freight services for those vehicles. And indeed, if we start using some of the HSTs as freight vehicles, which a couple of people have suggested, that would be improved even further. What you want to do, though, is flight them. So you're running the fast, frequent services and stopping them everywhere. You need to have the freight needs to be slotted within that. And don't get me wrong, that's a challenge. But freight fits better amongst stopping services. So if you've got freight that's running at 60 or 75 miles an hour, and you've got 125 mile an hour stopping services, that's a lot easier to fit together than stopping services and freight, and then non-stop fast services. Because the non-stop fast services that wreck your timetable and require loads of empty space. Hence why HS1. Sorry, I'm getting tired. Hence why HS1 is HS2. 38 minutes in and I'm already getting confused. HS2 will not run freight and shouldn't run freight. It's all about clearing up those, getting rid of those fast services off the existing main line. Right, let's have a look. How many cities and regions not served by HS2 benefit from it, e.g. Bristol in the southwest? Another good question. Bristol in the southwest will benefit, for example, by the release capacity at New Street, so that allows more connectivity through towards Bristol and the southwest. Potentially also, you alleviate some capacity issues by running down into HS2 into Euston, or into Old Oak Common rather, and then changing an Old Oak Common onto intercity services into Bristol, and that can be quicker than the current cross-country route, which is quite weavy. By doing so, you might well then get benefits around Gloucester by taking those intercity services off that main line and allowing them to just be running local services at higher frequencies, and then using the massive enhancements that have happened on the Great Western Railway, the Great Western Main Line. Actually, that you stop using cross-country services, you start running into Old Oak Common and then getting HS2 without seeing any hit to your journey time, and an increase in frequency actually. So there are actually substantial potential benefits for Bristol and the region. Those obviously haven't been quantified by anyone because no one's bothered to think about that sort of wonderful stuff. National Bonfire, Sir Andrew, look here. Yeah, sorry, Pace Commander. Any idea when they'll spark up Dundee and Perth? Pass. Electrification's paused a bit in Scotland, hasn't it? I'm afraid, but hopefully that'll reverse. Right, I'm going to go on to Twitter and see, because lots of people occasionally ask questions on Twitter without realising that I can't see them, so let's have a look. Thanks for oh, that's very nice. Thanks, Michael Batman. Yeah. Oh, no, that's all right. I'm still going. Happy days. Any other questions? Let's have a look. Oh, look. Yeah, I've caught up with questions somehow. There we go. Is this all right? Is it reasonably, if I do that, is it? Oh, that's horrible, isn't it? Let's not do that. I've got a light. I can shine it in my face. Oh, let's not do that. This is all nice and clear. I think everyone can see. Sorry, I've answered a lot of questions there. Hopefully that's useful. I'm gonna hang around until 7 because I can. How do I envisage Euston Underground coping with this influx of extra passengers? To be honest, this is why we need Crossrail 2. We need to be able to move people in that sort of. Weirdly, Crossrail 2 was the line that had the best. I mean, I hate them anyway, but it had the best benefit cost ratio of the 3 major railway upgrades that have happened, subterranean railway upgrades that have happened in London. The first being having the weakest case, which was the Jubilee Line extension. Crossrail being the Cross London Railway being the one that had kind of a middling kind of benefit cost ratio, and then Crossrail 2, or the Chelsea Hackney line, was the one that everyone expected to happen first. But that line is incredibly important for getting people out from the east of London, kind of actually there's this direction, isn't it, for you guys? Out from one side of London, shall we say, through and south to like the Waterloo area. So there's a huge amount of work required to improve. Yeah, so the Northern Line and all these different lines is they're going to, people need to travel on them. London will continue to have more people travelling by public transport, but London has London's got enough capacity in its system to benefit from kind of more assertive measures to reduce car usage, like ultra low emission zones, whereas the rest of the UK doesn't have that capacity. And so we need to be seeing investment within London, but also we need local transport systems to be getting investment, particularly in cities, Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool. These major cities, and Bristol, of course, these major cities require, it's ridiculous that these cities don't have proper underground systems, let alone trams and Leeds. It should have several metro lines, let alone, not even having a single rapid transit system. It's just bonkers. Right, here we go. Do HS2 trains use 3 times as much energy as standard intercity trains? One claim referred. Martin, yes. No, they do not. That's nonsense. It's based on using the laws of physics and just going, if it goes faster, it uses more energy. The reality is that these trains, firstly, they're newer trains, so they use less energy anyway because they're more sleek and efficient. Secondly, they have much higher capacity internally, so the HS2 trains are expected to have a capacity of around about 1,100 compared to about 400 on a typical intercity train. So, actually, you're reducing the energy consumption per seat. So yeah, it's a nonsense claim. It's just a load of rubbish. Slightly tangential. Do you have an opinion on hydrogen as a means to electrify rail versus overhead? Yeah, if only at the very extreme ends of our railway system should we be using hydrogen. If you're running more than 6 trains an hour in one direction, or you have speeds of 100 miles an hour or more, absolute by default it should be electrified conventionally. And then you've got a load of grey area ones where you're connecting things, those and kind of within the network, and you just have an island of unelectrified railway. Those should also be fully overhead electrified. Only lines like the West Highland line and some of the southwestern branches, maybe the Tarka line, for example, you wouldn't electrify, or at least you wouldn't prioritise electrification of those lines. But conventional electrification is by far the best way to go because you have a much cheaper railway system, a much more reliable railway system, much lighter trains, so on and so forth. David Powell is pointing out that HS3 is Northern Powerhouse Rail. Yeah, I hate the name Northern Powerhouse Rail because it's a gimmick name invented by George Osborne, but a lot of people use it, so I try to use what people describe it as, but it's High Speed 3. It's the third separate, distinct high-speed rail project in the UK, or at least it is since the 2000s, because the Selby Diversion was the first high-speed line in the UK, but that's for another live Railways Explained thread, right? Will high-speed trains be able to switch away from HS2 for engineering works? That depends on how many connections into the existing railway network we get. So HS2 is being designed as a almost 100% reliable railway. So you build it and you walk away. It will have certain closure periods, but it will be designed in such a way that you don't need to close it for engineering works. That's the advantage of a new railway system, is that you can design it such that, and it's not gold plating. This is making the consideration that railways, all railways are hugely unreliable because we have to spend so much time plastering them up and fixing them and screwing up bolts that fall into bits and X, Y, Z, all these different things. HS2, you have the benefit of designing it to be good absolutely brilliant from the offset. It's not gold plating. It's reducing, not least reducing the carbon footprint because of the travelling that people have to do to get to and maintain the railway. You look at Network Rail's carbon footprint. A huge amount of that is from people like me driving to site to survey and do things because we've got a load of kit that we can't haul on the train, or the last train is X and Y. So a lot of us travelling to site, and also because stations are usually often miles away from where things have gone wrong. Or batteries. Hydrogen and batteries are really heavy and do not. Yeah, hashtag not gold plating. Good stuff. Thanks, David. Hydrogen and battery. There's a really good little mini blog that I took that David Shearers had written. That's on the Permanent Rail Engineering website, but actually you can search rail engineer hydrogen, and he wrote a really nice long read on why hydrogen has limited applications. Is there any encouragement to getting logistics companies onto rail? Not by the current government, particularly. There are lots of really good efforts that the industry is pushing, but we're kind of hamstrung by the lack of any strategic planning at government level. Would you support the wiring of the line from Hull to Doncaster Leeds? Absolutely. The line should be fully electrified. For the half the time and twice the people. That's someone else answering questions. Thanks for that. How much wider a footprint will HS2 have from HS1 in Kent? Oh gosh. Pedro J UK. Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but it's not dissimilar, to be honest. People seem to make a huge fuss about the massive differences in footprint between, or in fact, they suggest HS1 has a colossal footprint. No, they don't. High-speed railway lines have a pretty narrow footprint. No matter whether you look, how you look at it, you consider that HS2 will have a capacity of 20,000 passengers per hour per direction. The M1 next to it will have a capacity, at best, of maybe a quarter of that. So to get the benefit of to match that capacity, you'd have to build a colossally wide motorway. So no, I don't. To answer your question, I've no idea. Google it, but it's not that much wider. And I think the extra width would be. Certainly in terms of the 6 foot, so that's the distance between the two tracks. There's no particular difference. In fact, we've been optimising that, reducing it slightly in a few places to further minimise that overall footprint. Of course, you never hear about all the value engineering work that goes on in the background, some of which I have actually worked on myself, to bring costs down, which is why when I hear cost escalation, I always get very surprised, because all of what I've seen is just costs being saved from value engineering. It's what happens to detailed design. It's just inherent. You save a lot of costs. Often it's contractor risk-based stuff that increases the price rather than the actual engineering itself. Is there any aspect of HS2 being able to provide high-speed, low-carbon freight services? HS2 already has a massive annual tonnage, so that's the amount of traffic running on it every year is huge. So, and it's designed to be absolutely optimized for passenger vehicles, lightweight passenger vehicles. So I'd strongly protest any freight running on that railway system. The point is that the existing railway network has, where all the depots and terminals and all this sort of freight stuff is already wired into, the existing railway network gets that massive capacity release, and you can start running more freight as well. So that's the benefit really is on the existing network. Right. Something about replies. Let's go in. So let's go in here. Someone. Forgive me for pushing this, but in the plans there is a link to HS1 and HS2. That link is like a slow speed link, and I think maybe that's doesn't exist anywhere anymore. I can't remember exactly actually, but I think it's been excluded entirely. Oh yeah, that link portal. Yeah, no, that doesn't exist anymore. Josh, that's been removed from the plans. Doesn't exist. That's an old map you're looking at, I think there. Periscope won't let me log in. Oh, David, get involved. Some thumbs up from people. Good, right. Where was I? I've fallen hopelessly behind, and I've got only got 10 minutes left because I think more than an hour would be completely nuts. No gold plating. Yep. Is there any aspect? Yep. Ever see a return of motor rail? No, we won't. Not enough space in cities for it to ever return, I'm afraid. Much as I'd love it to. But it's better that we encourage the use of hire vehicles. Actually, hire vehicles are actually brilliant. You don't have to own a car that doesn't do anything for ages. It minimises the amount of materials we have to waste building cars. So I'm all for people hiring cars at the end of their journeys. So more of that, please. Captive trains double deck. I'll answer the question already. 54 North. Is this the way to Amarillo? It might be. Stupid question. Nope, there's never a stupid question. Would it be possible to link up some modal freight to stopper services so it could be transported more easily? There are discussions about this sort of thing, actually. And there are also discussions about micro intermodal freight, where you only have maybe a few wagons being transported. Those are all really tricky when you have a complex railway network, busy, all this mixture of traffic. Once you start homogenizing things, actually those sorts of clever experiments and optimizing the way that you move freight around become possible. Is there an HS4 and does it lead to HS2? There is no HS4 as far as I've heard. I mean, where would it be? I don't know. Probably from, I dare say, from Cardiff through to Bristol and then up to Birmingham, if there was going to be one. That's probably where I'd stick it. Or my other proposal for high-speed segregation, which is sort of a bit like building a Trent Valley bypass, which is for the East Coast Main Line as primary, kind of the fast lines, if you like, to be diverted via Teesside to connect up that huge city and potential growth opportunity for new housing, for example, to go
round through, and then back up. And actually, you end up with it being faster than it currently weaving through north of Darlington. It gets a bit north of Northallerton. It gets a bit weavy. Is my tea cold yet? It's kind of. I'm having a Lady Grey because I quite fancied something that didn't have milk in it, so it's not cooled down quite as quickly. Technical answer for you, David. Heathrow or Gatwick, apparently. Not sure what that's in reference to. People often ask me about the connection, why HS2 doesn't connect to Heathrow. It does. Old at Common Station will have a Crossrail stop, and Crossrail will be really quick to get you to Heathrow. Oh, is that the end? Have I caught up with all the questions? That's incredible. Let's have a look. No, maybe. Yeah, it's just alright actually. Seems to be intact. Sorry. Would a high-speed version of the M25 be good for getting people to bypass London? Actually, this has been talked about quite a lot, and there is East West Rail generally will provide that facility in the East West Rail, which for crying out loud should have been electrified from the off. Don't get me started on that. The idea of building a new railway, let alone a 125 mile an hour one that doesn't just automatically have electrification, is just baffling to me. Absolutely baffling. East West Rail, once it runs around from between Cambridge and Oxford, will do a really good job of that. But in terms of connections in the south, it's always good to increase connectivity. You just have to assess that project on the basis of how valuable that would be versus, for example, building tunneling through Manchester or Birmingham. Both the Castlefield corridor, which a lot of people talk about, and is like singularly responsible for much of the disruption on Northern and Transpennine at the moment. That route has been needing upgrades for decades, and the Pickwick Tunnel, which you can Google, get out and Google it, was one of the ways to solve that. And basically, we've skirted around the edges and avoided building it. We did the entire Metrolink system, which is brilliant, but it's not a replacement for heavy rail. It's a light rail system that's absolutely superb for density within the city centre, but actually you need to have the higher speed, higher frequency, kind of higher capacity heavy rail metro system, and it should tunnel under Manchester. The reason why Crossrail and my Thameslink have such high capacities is because they don't have to deal with really big, busy, weavy sort of station throats. There's just 2 platforms for every single station through the core, which means that a train arrives, people get on and off it, it clears it off, and another one arrives almost on its tail, and you can just conveyor belt people and trains through, and so you get this immense capacity. That's something that we need to emulate elsewhere. And for me, the 2 key ones that jump out are the Cross City Line in Birmingham and the Castlefield corridor in Manchester. Check out Twitter post for reply by me. Rail, yeah, south of the M25, it does sort of exist. Reading Tunbridge, but it needs electrifying. It needs electrifying with overheads actually as well. HS4 Air, yeah, that's a kind of a brand name that hasn't really kicked off yet. It's sort of up in the air. It doesn't really properly exist. Cheers, David. We've got 5 minutes left. I'll stick this on YouTube later. Hopefully it'll answer some questions. It's very waffly and rattly on, isn't it? Let's see. Yes, I will stick this on YouTube later, David. Hi, Gareth. I live in Kidderminster, so currently have a direct line to London on Chiltern Railways. Hi, Jane. Yes. Will that survive if HS2 is launched? Currently, yeah. There are no plans to alter the Chiltern line operation. Actually, Chiltern Railways do kind of run as a bit of a high-speed stopping service already. My preference would always be that you end up procuring electric train. That line needs electrifying for starters. My preference would always be that you procure electric trains that can run up to 125 miles an hour, but they stop everywhere, because then you can bunch your services up much more closely together. So even though perhaps your journey time doesn't improve, or maybe even gets a little bit longer, you don't have to plan your day around an hourly service or even a service every kind of half hour. If your trains are running every 10 minutes or less, 7.5 minutes, or even more frequently than that, you do save time in your day by not having to plan your day around a more infrequent service. So I think we need to change our mindset about journey times being key, because for most passengers, it's more about reliability, getting a seat, and not having to plan your day around trains. Those are the 3 key things. And actually, journey time specifically isn't the main driver of journeys. So even on the West Coast Main Line, you wouldn't lose your direct. I'm not proposing that people would lose their direct London service. It's just that the train would stop everywhere on the line. But I realise that sounds quite radical and it might upset a few people. But if you get a colossal leap in capacity and in service frequency, I think that benefits people, particularly if it means that you can move to other places outside of the big hubs. You can live somewhere that's a little more, more accessible for other things, or maybe close to family. If your local station has a train every 15 minutes rather than every 2 hours. What do you think about the AV network? Yes, great. Any sense of where servicing of HS2 will be? New railway employment centre. There's one in Leeds going in, isn't there? There's a massive HS2 service rolling stock servicing depot going in Leeds. Where's the other one? Is it it's probably in London somewhere, isn't it? Is it maybe near Old Oak Common, perhaps, that they'll have the rolling stock depot? I can't remember off the top of my head. I really ought to memorise exactly what the layout of HS2 is, but actually my role isn't so much to know the ins and outs of the design perfectly from top to bottom. It's more to kind of make the case for why it's so important, why high-speed segregation is so important. Any more questions? We've got 3 minutes left. We're getting close to finishing time. My tea is mod cold. Hopefully some people recognise this lovely railway poster. Nice, marvellous. I didn't eat my tonic to caramel wafer. It's probably for the best because it's dinner time. Cool. Thanks, David. Depending on how horrifying this was, and just see myself waving a mug around in the screen over there. I won't do that again. Hopefully this was useful. I always enjoy Q&A sessions. They're kind of much easier to. I like that engagement. It's really nice, particularly the people who accuse me of having a fake accent. My accent's a mess. My dad's from North Devon. My mum's Welsh. I grew up in Inverurie. I'm a cartoon hate figure for the Stop HS2 movement. Why is that? Oh, let's end on that, shall we? Because I hope it's because I've communicated far better to a lot more people what the whole point of the railway line is. I hope that's why I'm a hate figure, because I've succeeded in converting a lot more people than the previous comms team in HS2 ever managed to. Go on. Another question. Should they electrify the line from Cardiff and Birmingham? Absolutely they should. Pretty much every main line needs to be electrified. If it's a two-track railway, the chances are it needs fully electrifying. All the commercial speed be on HS2. Most of the trains will run about 330 kilometres an hour, and occasionally they'll run at 360 to just kind of catch up if there's a bit of delay or whatever it is. Or at peak times to move trains around more quickly. Cool. Let's see. Very useful. Thanks very much indeed. Yeah, 360 is the kind of maximum speed, but actually most trains will run at 330 kilometres an hour. Thanks, Martin. Yeah, hopefully I had a few converts. Yeah, 225 miles an hour is 360 kilometres an hour, but actually most of the trains will run at 330. Right, okay. 18:59. I'll keep this to an hour. Everyone, that's been really brilliant. I've enjoyed it. Hopefully some useful kind of answers to that. Have a nice rest of the day, and I will maybe do another one of these soon. Cheerio!